If you die this week, it makes everything easier for me. He whispered that, thinking I was sedated, while he smoothed the blanket over my chest with that half-smile I had never seen before. From the hallway, I could hear the rushed footsteps of nurses, the constant beeping of monitors, and the air conditioner humming like the hospital itself was breathing for me. On the screen, my name, my age, my diagnosis in red: acute failure, days, maybe hours. When he stepped out of the room to take a phone call, still smiling, I didn't cry. I just pressed the call button for the nurse and asked for one simple thing, almost in a whisper, like it was a last, fragile wish from a dying patient. I need to speak with someone from the legal department. Now. In that moment, while everyone thought I was getting ready to say goodbye to life, I was actually signing the beginning of the end of his plan. The United States always felt like a place where everything could be turned into paperwork: marriage, divorce, property, life insurance. Ironic to think about that while lying in a hospital bed in New York, with 3 doctors standing in front of me and my younger husband holding my hand like we were in a movie. Unfortunately, we're talking about days, maybe a week, the oncologist said, his eyes sliding away from mine after just a second. My husband squeezed my hand with carefully measured force, performing a sob that never quite became real crying. I was dizzy from the flood of information, but not so far gone that I missed the way his thumb stopped stroking my skin the moment the doctor said there wasn't enough time for aggressive treatment. In the previous weeks, something had already felt off. Small changes: he started coming home later, hiding his phone, getting irritated whenever I brought up bills, investments, the life insurance policy. There was a 15-year age gap between us, something people never let us forget, especially after we signed a joint will and a high-value life insurance policy in my name. Still, nothing prepared me for that smile. When the doctor left and the nurse came in to adjust the 4, he leaned down, kissed my forehead, and for a split second, his face relaxed. It was a small smile, almost invisible, but there was nothing sad about it. It was the smile of someone who considers the game already won. "You're going to be okay, baby," he murmured, all soft and caring. But when he straightened up and turned his back to me, his shoulders dropped in a way I knew too well, the same way they did when a business deal went through, when he signed a contract that favored him. And then, for the first time, a brutal thought cut through the fog in my head. He isn't afraid of losing me. He's counting on it. My body felt weak, but my mind suddenly went cold and sharp. From that moment on, the pain wasn't just in my organs. There was a new kind of ache, heavier, made of betrayal and a strange, rising instinct, not just to survive, but to protect everything he was already treating as his. When he stepped out to take a call in the hallway, I did something I had never done before. I pretended to be worse than I was. I let my eyelids droop, made my breathing shallower, allowed my body to sink into the mattress as if I were slipping away. It worked. The nurse started checking on me more often, anxiety in her eyes, which gave me exactly the opening I needed. "Are you in a lot of pain?" she asked, watching the monitor. "I am, but what I need most right now is a lawyer. Or someone from the hospital's legal department," I answered, my voice raspy. She stared at me, surprised, torn between protocol and compassion. "It's about advance directives, and my will, and who gets to make decisions if I can't," I added, giving her the exact language she recognized from every terminal case she had seen. In large American hospitals, this kind of request is normal: patients wanting to update documents, appoint healthcare proxies, formalize end-of-life decisions. That was the crack in the system I intended to push open. At that moment, I didn't know this would later be used against me in a way I couldn't foresee. The attorney affiliated with the hospital arrived a few hours later, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a folder already filled with standard forms. My husband, fortunately and suspiciously, had gone out to handle some insurance stuff and said he'd be back soon. I understand you want to talk about medical directives and your existing documents, the attorney said, taking a seat near the bed. Yes. And I want to update who is in charge if I become incapacitated, I replied, forcing my voice to stay steady. Until that day, my husband was the primary everything, decision-maker, beneficiary, executor. It had always made sense. He was younger, sharper with numbers, good with institutions, comfortable speaking to doctors and bankers. But now, that list of responsibilities looked less like trust and more like a noose I had placed around my own neck. I want to remove my husband as my primary decision-maker, I said slowly. His pen stopped mid-air. Do you feel pressured by him in any way? He asked, switching from routine to cautious. I feel like, if I'm not here, his life gets easier. And he knows it, I answered. It wasn't a direct accusation. It didn't need to be. We went through the forms one by one. I changed my healthcare proxy to my older sister in Florida, someone who actually argued with doctors instead of charming them. Then we reviewed my living will and, finally, my existing estate documents. Your current will and beneficiary designations are outside my direct scope, but I can help you contact someone or notarize urgent statements, he explained. I need something that triggers automatically if I die in the next few days, I said. He raised an eyebrow, measuring my clarity, my intent. In the end, we drafted a short but very specific instruction, a written directive and a sworn statement indicating that, due to recent concerns about my husband's behavior and potential financial conflict of interest, certain assets and decisions should be temporarily frozen and reviewed if I died within a short time frame. It wasn't elegant, and it wasn't a full estate overhaul, but it was enough to start a legal chain reaction, especially in a country where hospitals, insurers, and banks hate the smell of liability. I signed with a trembling hand, not knowing if I had days or hours left. Then I handed the pen back, feeling both lighter and terrified. Things started happening faster than I expected. The next morning, a hospital social worker came in with the attorney, their energy suddenly more formal, more documented. They asked if I was comfortable with my husband handling all my affairs alone. I repeated, calmly, what I had already put in writing, that I no longer wanted him to be my sole decision-maker. Nothing about their faces said drama, but the fact that they were there together told me everything. The hospital was now protecting itself, which meant, indirectly, they were protecting me too. When my husband walked in a little later, coffee in hand, he froze. The social worker introduced herself politely, explained the new documentation, the change in healthcare proxy, and the need to have certain decisions routed through my sister. For a fraction of a second, his mask slipped. His jaw tightened, and that easy charm he always used on strangers didn't quite land this time. "Sweetheart, why didn't you talk to me first?" he asked, voice soft but eyes cold. "Because every time I talk to you about money, you get relieved when I talk about dying," I answered, watching him carefully. He didn't explode. He adjusted. "I've just been overwhelmed, that's all." "This is a lot to handle," he said to the social worker, performing vulnerability like he'd rehearsed it in a mirror. But now there was a record, notes being typed, forms being filed, boxes being checked. And outside that hospital room, in systems I couldn't see, other things started shifting. The temporary flag on my file meant that, if I died suddenly, insurance payouts and certain transfers would not move instantly the way he thought. Instead, they would be reviewed, audited, and possibly contested. A few days later, someone from the life insurance company tried to call me directly, which was strange, considering they usually dealt with him. They had received a notice from the hospital about potential conflict of interest and wanted to confirm some details. He intercepted one of the calls, and that was the first time I saw real panic in his eyes. In the hallway, his voice rose, then dropped to a furious whisper. He paced, gestured, turned his back toward my door as if that could mute reality. Whatever he had planned, the timing, the numbers, the narrative of the grieving younger husband, it was no longer moving in a straight line. The more he tried to fix things, the more paperwork appeared. Emails. Confirmations. Requests for clarification. My quiet instruction from that hospital bed had turned him from future beneficiary into person of interest in a system that documents everything. For the first time since the diagnosis, I saw something shift. I was still weak, still sick, still uncertain about my own future. But his control over mine was slipping, inch by inch, and there was nothing he could do without leaving footprints. What happened next wasn't the victory I wanted, but it changed everything. I didn't die in a week. The doctors adjusted my medication, a treatment responded better than expected, and the days to live window turned into something less defined, still serious, still dangerous, but no longer an immediate countdown. I was alive long enough to see the fallout of my one quiet instruction. The insurance company opened a formal review of my policy due to the new statements and timing. They requested interviews, financial records, and copies of older communications he thought no one would ever read closely. Suddenly, his late-night emails about timelines, his attempts to increase coverage shortly before my diagnosis, and his insistence on being the primary contact didn't look so innocent. He never confessed to anything. There was no dramatic courtroom scene, no handcuffs, no villain's monologue. What there was, instead, was something slower and, in a way, more unsettling, suspicion that never fully left his file, a black mark on his name with institutions that are very quiet but never forget. Our marriage didn't end in one explosion, it eroded. He became defensive, resentful, and annoyed that a piece of paper could cause him so many problems. I became someone who read everything, asked for copies, and refused to sign anything without independent advice. Eventually, I filed for legal separation, then divorce. The flagged policies, the hospital notes, the timing, all of it created enough doubt that his leverage over me shrank. He didn't get the easy payout, the seamless access, the silent control he had counted on. He walked away angry, with less than he had envisioned, and a version of his story he couldn't fully sell anymore. I walked away alive, but altered, not cured, not safe, not magically free of illness or fear. Just awake. People love stories where the bad person is exposed spectacularly, dragged out in front of everyone. That didn't happen here. What happened instead was that a quiet, scared woman in a hospital bed signed her name on a document that made powerful systems pay attention. And once they started paying attention, he could no longer move in the dark the way he thought he could. He thought my last days would be his beginning. But the moment he smiled at the idea of my death was the exact moment everything he planned to take began slipping away, not all at once, not completely, but enough to make sure that if my life ended, my story wouldn't belong to him.